Guys, we are back. I'm with Eric, one of my favorite clients. We're going to be attacking the upper inner thigh today. Interesting spot. We're going to be doing a male face with beard texture, hair texture. I'm going to be going over my approach to this. Things that I'm going to be paying attention to are how dark to make the hair, how I'm going to make the texture look like hair, how I'm going to keep the face visible and still draw attention to it with all this stuff going on, and working it into the current pieces in the leg sleeve. So let's get into the stencil. All right, so we're getting into the stencil. You guys can see this piece from last time in one of our recent videos. It healed beautifully. It really looks like all this is one, and that's what I'm going for when I'm doing any sleeve. We have a portrait here. We obviously have this here, so we're gonna be connecting this area. I have the stencil here, the face. So the goal is to kind of have this face almost like looking up at the portrait. And we're most likely going to be mirroring on the other side. So it's good to be thinking about future concepts all the time, being aware of your surroundings. So I don't want to butt it up right against it. The two faces, they might look weird if they're too close. I'm going to be aiming to put it more down here. Now this spot here is really a dead zone, meaning not a lot of people are going to see it. So I'm trying to keep the main features, the eyes, nose, and mouth, more in the forefront where it's more visible. The whole spot in general is one of the more difficult ones to see. So we're going to do what we can with it, but I'm going to be aiming for like about here. I'm going to work it right down into the two heads. We have some negative here and here that I just implemented to remind myself that I want that, but I might end up just freehanding that in and filling the background. So let's get the stencil on. So you guys have seen me do this before. I'm overlaying the stencil right on top of the healed tattoos so that it reaches, so we'll have no problem connecting the two. I'm making sure every area of the stencil is touching the skin by pushing down on it, the eyes, nose, mouth. Let it kind of chill for a sec and then we'll rip it off. Where I'm going to be starting on the tattoo is actually on the back side. And I'm going to roll him forward as the day progresses. So I am starting, technically bottom right, and I'll be ending bottom left, just like I would any other tattoo. I try to get them in a position, finish everything in that position, and move to a new one, if possible. So I don't have the client bouncing around all day. Here, we're gonna start on this outer border, of the tattoo, and in the design, the background on this outer border is black. I'm gonna leave it pretty tight as far as backgrounds go, just enough to lock in the image in a frame, but not too much where I start to get into this area that we'll utilize in the future. If I later have to extend the black to meet an image, no problem. I just don't want to overdo the black and get in the way of a future session. So what you see, we have an ear, right here. It's going to be a dark ear. And then in our reference, this hair here is lighter. So I'm going to probably attack the ear first. I'm going to get this nice dark background in so that these shine points are really highlighted. This is a continuation of a negative kind of wisp thing we got going on here. So I'll bring my background up to here just to lock that in. And then we're just going to move right into the face. So I'll get this framework of the outer part of the image done with a nice light black fade, and then start making my way to the ear and the rest of the image, which is mostly hair. So let's get into it. So we have our black frame in. We started to work on the ear and some of the surrounding hair. I want to take you guys through my approach on this hair. Really, I'm breaking down the hair into simple shapes. So I'm going to find shapes. And it's kind of like in the flow. So there's one here, there's kind of like long shape that comes down. The shapes are going to define the flow of the hair. We're going to see this a little bit better on the other side. But sometimes the hair can be overwhelming. So if we just kind of look at like, okay, I'm just going to pay attention to this shape or this squiggly one here, and I'm only going to worry about that, and I'm going to move on to the next one. That's how I make this a little bit more manageable for myself. We're going to start with this one. I'm just going to put in the dark shadows. The dark shadows are right here and down here. You'll notice patterns in the hair. A lot of times the pattern is they're just kind of drawing a line down the center. One side is dark, other side is light. And as they twist, almost like a snake with like the belly, now the shadow disappears and it starts again. There's another shadow here. Very similar to like drawing those like traditional snakes. Over here, same thing, like you kind of just cut it in the middle, and most of these tones are shadow. So we're going to put that in because it's going to make the shape a little bit easier to see. So I'll put this dark shadow in, this one down here, cutting the shape in half with a shadow, exposing kind of the mid-tone highlight region where we're going to put our details. So we're going to be doing big shadows to cut the shape in half. And then on the other side, in the highlight area, we're going to put some texture details. And we're just going to repeat this with all the big shapes of the hair. Let me show you. So here's one of our shadows, our big shadows. The shadows are kind of simple. I'm not going to go crazy with like texture details in the shadow. And that border where the shadow meets the highlight side, I'm going to keep dark. So I'm going to be flicking down off that shadow. So we're cutting it in half. Everything below that line, we're making shadow. And and I drew this up in the stencil process to make my life easier. And I have those like strands coming out just to emphasize the texture. This bottom here is where the hair starts to twist. So our shadow starts to disappear. These shadows also separate these shapes from the other shapes. It creates that break, right? So then here we actually have a shadow on the next shape. And this is going to separate from the first one we were working on. So we can kind of see this snake shape come down here. There's another strand of hair here. And it's like this is the underbelly of the strand of hair we're working on. This image is designed like a statue. So the hair is pretty sharp, and kind of jagged. So we can even bump our contrast. We can simplify a little bit. We can make hard cast shadows. Because it does have that like stone kind of angular look, which is fun. You see a lot of people tattooing sculptures. They give you that room to do like super high contrast images. You don't really find yourself like doing all these like strands of hair. You're really just kind of separating textures. And the shadow is going to be darker. You want to be careful because we're pretty much in Eric's knee ditch right now. So I try to only cause necessary pain. So if I'm in a sensitive area, try my best to be light-handed, get in, get out. So we see these like strand tips starting to form, like the tips of the hair from the beard. And nice enough, there's a bunch of shadows on the lower ends of the beard to kind of taper off the hair. And I'm going to use those shadows to tie right into our little angels down here that we did last episode with Eric. And I'm going to leave some negative space around the hair to almost give like a little glow effect. But more importantly, like a good contrast effect. So if I surround the head in shadow, because it has lighter hair, it's going to pop out a little bit more. I'll show you guys this in a sec. So we have our major dark shadows put in. As the shadow half kind of progresses into the highlight half of the strand, you kind of see we have these like little divots in here, these little dark shapes. So it kind of goes from like completely dark, dark shape, and then highlight. So here's another dark shape as it kind of graduates into its mid-tone. And with these like little transition pieces, it does develop kind of a texture in the hair. So you're gonna see that pattern repeated throughout the tattoo. So like here's our dark, and now here are some texture points. And like I said, it's kind of like stone-like, so these texture points are pretty deep. So they're gonna be almost black. So for me, it really helps getting the darks in there, the shadows. It lets me kind of see how the image is gonna look final product wise, and it gives me a better feel for this. You know, getting the shadows in there, getting the dark defining points, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like starting to look like a piece of hair. Like I get this. And once I get that in, you can start messing with some more details. You know, you've got the structure in there now. So once that structure's in, it's kind of the fun part. You get to do the details. So I'm going to show you guys a little bit of the details that I'll be putting in, which is really just to develop some texture. So we're going to go back down. So the flow is, you know, this S, like I was talking about the snake body before. So I'm actually just going to take a light gray and I'm just going to shade in the direction of the flow. And a lot of these like large texture points we put in have shadows kind of coming from it. So you can use those to kind of work off of. You know, so I'll come in with something light and I'm just kind of creating my direction. You know, and I'll have some negative space being created. And then I'm just layering it. You know, I am looking at the picture to see the texture points that it has. But I'm also sticking to the rule of like, okay, it's going to follow the flow of the shape. We're going to come off of the dark shades that I already made and we're just like continuing the flow. It's almost like I'm just taking on where I left off with these like black spikes and I'm just kind of continuing it with gray. See? And every time we add a new tone, we add a new layer. You know, and this thing looks even more and more detailed. If you really want to get crazy, you can start going just in these like little areas. Cool, so I would say we're pretty much done with this strand. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just taking a mag and I'm just kind of picking the corners with black just to really make sure the areas that I want to be black are black. You can also use the mag to do your big shades, like over the details you made. So like I could use it like this to kind of come up the side. We've talked about this before. This is like just when we're working with bigger shadows, right over the details. Now I want to make sure there's some good separation between these big flow patterns, these big strands of hair, if you want to call it that. So I'm always going to check the sides to make sure they're defined, because things are very like cut and dry on this beard. It's like, this hair strand starts here, it ends here. So we're just going to follow those rules. There are a few times that it's not as sharp or structured. So you'll see that kind of like in the area I'm working now, but for the most part, it's very easy to find, and follow the big strands. So everything I just showed you, I'm going to continue to do that throughout the beard and the hair. I'm going to kind of tackle, a generic big shape. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to find the shadow side, the highlight side, get my dark structure shadows in there, do the details and the highlights. And with that, we'll have some good looking hair. So we got this nice dark border going on the face, meets the temple and the cheek. Right now I want to focus on the mustache. We have this very like well lit, defining strand of mustache. So it's very pronounced from the light, meaning like there's a lot of negative space surrounded by this dark mouth border, the nostril, and kind of the cheek line. So I want to keep that pronunciation that it has. So how do we get this mustache to pop out, to be very pronounced? We're going to surround it by darkness, like my childhood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build shadows on all the sides. So right here, this is the bottom of the cheek, which has a nice shadow. As it starts to get closer to the nose, it becomes very dark as it hugs the nostril. So already we're starting to cut off the negative space. We're creating the negative space. The slower I move, the darker it will be. Gives more time for the needle to hit. Then the negative is stopped by the nostril. So over here in the nostril, which is pretty much black. Has this top rim here. And then kind of casts a shadow over a decent part of the nose. And in the photo, this is pretty much all black. Definitely want to keep an eye on your reference to figure out what's black and what's just a dark shade. It's brought right down here to kind of split the mustache. So that cuts it off at the top. We'll build this up a little bit more. And then we have the mouth. You can kind of see the top lip, and then the bottom lip kind of pokes out, almost like he's making a pouty face. But the top lip is black. So this whole area we're going to flick right off our negative space on our nice mustache. This is a pretty solid mustache. think one Fritz would be jealous of. I really want to do it justice with this nice kind of high contrast approach. Everyone will be able to see it. You can see the more black we add around it, the more it pops. And that's definitely our goal. That's what I'm trying to accomplish right now. Trying to make clear borders where this thing starts and where it ends. I'm using the ultra black. And I'm kind of attacking the parts that are solid black, the darkest parts. You guys always see me do this. I'll attack the blacks first, build the structure. Now that we have those kind of marked, I'm gonna move into more just the dark grays. So these spots are not black, but they're a very dark shade. And these shades will continue to define the mustache. So we're still flicking off the mustache. You'll see me go lay the shade in, go right over the black so that everything's darkening together. So we're in dark gray territory. Now we're in black. And it just stops it right here. It really shows you the shape on this thing. We're gonna move back up towards the nose. And we're gonna come right into the mustache. Now you're just gonna slow down, make sure it's shaped really nice. So now I kind of have all the shades that are bordering this mustache, this part that I want to stick out. So boom, we just carved that out very nicely. So now I can take a good look at it. I can dilute my black a little bit. And I can come back in to do the lighter tones inside the mustache. I'm going to be adding just little texture points, just like we did in the other hair. I don't want to overdo it though. I don't want it to be too crowded because I want it to hold on to its negative space. So if I fill this thing up with like too many texture points, it's going to look gray. And I really just want it to look white, you know, like have that negative skin appeal to it. So I'm not going to get too crazy. You're just going to see me move fast, just enough, and that's it. The details I'm putting in now are really just enough gray to make it not skin tone. I'm not going for anything crazy, but I feel like you could really even just leave it as is with that high contrast look and get a nice looking final product. I'm just gonna come back and hit some of the edges to like round it off a little bit. Now I'm gonna finish the nose, the mouth. I'll get the other side of the mustache done, which is in kind of our shadow side of the face, the dark side. And I'll give you guys an update, show you how it looks when I get it done. So we are at the end of the day. Eric had a great 8-hour session. We went a little long today. I wanted to make sure we got a majority of this tattoo done. So everything that I felt needed to be accomplished for this session, we did accomplish. So I'm thrilled with the results on this. We got a majority of the face done. You can see in the eyes, the mouth, the nose, these dark parts hold the structure of the face. We got all the outside hair, the dark hair, to frame the entire piece. I wasn't able to get as much of the background done as I like, which is really gonna make this thing pop, but we'll take care of that next session. So very happy with what we got done today. I took you guys through the hair textures, you know, for this statue-like figure, a little different than some hair textures you guys have seen me do in other videos. We have the face, it pops beautifully with the dark features. The cheeks are showing, you know, in the lights, the highlights. So I'm very happy with how this face is turning out. I cannot wait to get back in there, and put a nice dark background for with you guys. Please let me know in the comments other textures you'd like to see me do or go over or explain my method. Just drop a comment, let me know, be like, hey John, you haven't made a video about this. And we'll get to it as soon as we can. Thank you guys so much for watching and see you next video.